I want to start today with a crime reality check. Today we're not talking about vicious crime, not drugs or burglary. Today we're looking at fraud. Mainly because in many parts of the UK, this now makes up a significant portion of all recorded crime. And yet, it's still the one that people are most unwilling or too embarrassed to talk about. Today, we are getting inside the reality of financial crime. We're not here just to skim read some headlines or to make some assumptions based on stereotypes. We're actually going to find out what it looks like on the front line and what it does to real victims. My guest today is an expert who tackles this every single day. Now, some of the stories he has to tell will shock you, and they'll likely stay with you for a while, not least because they could happen to any one of us at any time. Welcome to Money Crimes and Human Minds, the place where we look at financial crime through the lens of behaviour and human decision making. We're not here to shame victims or to glamorise offenders. We're here to understand why it works and how we stop it. So today I am joined by Detective Chief Inspector Benjamin Robinson, the Senior Investigating Officer of the Major Crimes Unit. Now, Ben, you not only head up some of the most serious crime investigations in Humberside, but you also specialise in economic crime, cybercrime and asset recovery. So before we dive into some specific cases, can you give our listeners a little sense of what happens in your world day to day? How much of your workload is now fraud related?
So my job on a day-to-day basis is being a senior investigating officer. I have the lead for a number of serious investigations, homicides, kidnaps, things like that. The fraud world, my team who investigate serious and complex fraud or where there's some serious vulnerability involved, they have 65 ongoing investigations. I say that number because there's only 4 dedicated detectives in the team. So you can see they have a real high workload. And those jobs range from anything from a multi-million pound investment fraud that we have going to court tomorrow, right through to offences where we have got persons in positions of trust that have taken advantage of people and defrauded them of their life savings a lot of the time. So you can see having the oversight of all those investigations and making sure that we're delivering for those vulnerable individuals is quite a lot of work.
So it's a big ask, isn't it? And it does seem to be a lot more prevalent these days. I mean, I was thinking back to maybe 10 years ago, and the world felt very different then, didn't it? We were, talking about Brexit all the time. We had David Cameron as Prime Minister. We were using iPhone 7s, for goodness sake. A lot has changed since then, hasn't it? How has cybercrime and financial fraud evolved in that last decade or so?
I've been working in the fraud world for the vast majority of that 10 years, 7 years in my particular role. And how we've seen fraud and how fraud is perpetrated has definitely evolved with the evolution of technology in particular. So we see fraudsters move away from, offences where people would be targeted through mail to purely being targeted through your mobile phone or your laptop computer. With something like a mobile phone having access to emails, apps, etc., they're a perfect operating environment for a fraudster.
It's a bit of an unintended consequence, I suppose, of all this technological advancements. Like, we just didn't realise, did we, how open that would leave people to this kind of risk, I suppose.
No, I don't think, potentially we didn't realise that, but what fraudsters and their professional criminals are really good at are taking advantage of the situation that we find ourselves in. So with ready access to apps, emails, text messages, WhatsApp, etc., fraudsters have access to all of that material as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? And I suppose it's also scary that a lot of us still feel like fraud is, a cheeky email that we would go, oh, have you seen this? The Sultan of Brunei wants to, send me my lottery winnings and that kind of thing. But I guess that's probably quite a dangerously outdated idea nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's a real strange phenomenon that when we talk about frauds, and the way we just discussed it there is we laugh about it. I don't think there's any other crime time that we laugh about. You wouldn't say, oh, I'll tell you what, I got burgled yesterday and they made a right mess of my house and took the TV. Whereas we're quite happy to say, oh, look at this email asking me to invest in this.
Yeah.
What we don't actually say is, I've been sent this email by a professional criminal organisation who are looking to target me to take advantage of a vulnerability I might have in my life to steal my life savings, because that's what these fraudsters are effectively doing.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah. And it is common, isn't it? I mean, I was talking with my family members. My mother in law got one of them text messages, where they pretend to be your son or someone and they say, oh, my phone's broken and that kind of thing. And we all were a bit like, oh, aren't they? Aren't they
Yeah,
naughty? And you're absolutely right. We just don't take it seriously enough. Like you say, it's a targeted, horrible attack that someone's desperately trying to defraud you. And we're all kind of quite blasé about it, really, aren't we?
yeah. It
So,
almost
talk.
becomes second place in society that we expect this to happen, but
Yeah.
we don't necessarily take the steps to prevent it from happening.
It's a fair point. Yeah, there is. In fact, there's the normalcy bias, isn't there, where our brains are tricked into believing that if it feels normal, then it's reasonable, and it's certainly not
Mm.
reasonable, is it? And I
No.
suppose I know you can't tell me too many specifics, but is there a case or a couple of cases that have really kind of stayed with you or stuck out, something that kind of tells us a bit more about the human reality and the impact of this kind of crime?
Absolutely. There's a couple. I think the first one I talk about is in the first few weeks of taking over the job of the sergeant in the economic crime unit. I went out to see a victim of a romance fraud, although they very much didn't see they were a victim of romance fraud. And this person had already taken all the money they had in their account and had now persuaded them to put their house up for sale. And I actually managed to cancel the house sale on three separate occasions, because each time we were doing it, they tried to sell the house through someone else. So that one sticks in my mind in particular, the lengths and how deep some people can get into the deception that's been told to them because of the situation in their life, that they would put their house up for sale, which is like a perfect introduction to the second job, which sticks in all of our minds really in our department. It was an individual who during the lockdown was very much isolated from her family. Her husband had died not too long before the lockdown situation had taken place, and she ended up losing £500,000 to fraudsters through a befriending offence. And it that the sort of level that basically her entire life had been spent through lockdown talking to the fraudsters through technology, through emails and chat, etc., that her life with the fraudsters had almost become embroiled in one, and to the extent believed them so much to give away that huge amount of money to actually what she thought she was providing money to help people in another part of the world. Um,
Oh.
yeah.
Isn't that awful? You do seem to often, when you read these stories and you think, these are people, like nice people, that they've got nice qualities and they see the world and they see all the best of people and they want really good things, don't they? And isn't it sad, really, that that is sometimes the thing, the door that is exploited to end up, I mean, £500,000 is terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge amount of money, and to think that's one person in one small area of the country, one smallish police force in the country, the scale of fraud is absolutely enormous.
Yeah, it's frightening. And in that first case, you said you just stopped them selling the house 3 times. So does that mean even after you guys had kind of been involved and you've said, we think, this is not genuine, that they persevered? They kept on saying, no, everything's fine here, kind of thing?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. It's not the first victim of that type of offence that we've been to, and we've taken articles you've printed off the internet to explain what romance fraud, almost as if you don't believe me, believe
yeah.
um, what someone else has written about in an article. But because of the vulnerability in that person's life in that particular moment, they're so embroiled in that situation that they can't believe us, and it's because of the professional criminal at the other end. The story that they've told is, oh, other people might say this, or they'll try and tell you this isn't a reality. It is a reality. I am coming to you, etc. So we almost form into the narrative that they've told the person.
Yeah, that's dreadful, isn't it? And I mean, we talk about these criminals. For most of us, we even say the term criminal like as if, but we don't know these people. We've never really encountered a lot of this. But you guys have interviewed, you've sat with these people. So when they talk about their victims or these situations, if they do, someone they've groomed for an amount of time and have taken their money, are they remorseful or are they indifferent? Do they laugh at the situation? What are these people like a lot of the time?
When we're talking about those criminals targeting people online, the vast majority of them, unfortunately, live outside of the country. So there's absolutely nothing we can do. There's not many people I know of jobs that we've had in our office that have been remorseful or have even admitted. I'm trying to rack my brains. Maybe a couple of jobs. So no.
For the most part, it's just business as usual. Part of the day job kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's horrible, isn't it?
If you think the offences I've been talking about there, the romance type fraud, they'll generally be perpetrated from someone within almost what you'd think of as a call centre type setup in a country outside or a city, town, whatever, outside of the England. And they might have a script like how they have in a call centre to start how this conversation goes. So when I say it's organised criminality, that's what it is. They're professionals at what they're doing. Don't like to give them any kudos, but that is their job, as it were, their profession.
And yeah, I suppose psychologically, we're all the same, aren't we? The more you do something, the more confident you become at it, the success rate improves, and then your brain tricks you into thinking, well, you should just keep on doing this. It's working, it's achieving the goal. And I suppose the more success they have, the more prevalent it becomes, and we're stuck in a bit of a vicious cycle, really, aren't we?
We are.
It is a worry. And I suppose in these kind of romance scams, like from a human behaviour perspective, we look at the sunk cost fallacy, don't we, where someone's reluctant to change that course of action. They're so heavily invested, whether it's emotionally or financially. And I suppose once you stop, it means you have to admit that it wasn't real, that there's a loss there, an emotional element. And yeah, it's very scary, isn't it? And I suppose what listeners will be wondering is, why do intelligent people fall for this kind of thing?
Well, the first thing to do answering that question is just to pick up on a little bit of language there. Is one thing we always try and encourage is to say people don't fall victim to fraud. They're targeted by organised criminals who extract money from them by various different ways, but they don't fall victim to it. I've used an analogy before of a burglary. You don't fall victim to a burglary. Yeah. You wouldn't. So that's sort of language we use. But how people can become victims of fraud is something we would call situational vulnerability. So for one reason or another, then there may be a vulnerability to that individual. And when I use the word vulnerability, some people might automatically assume that they're, someone maybe crumbled up in a corner, can't face the world, they're vulnerable. But that's not necessarily the case. It might be that someone's using WhatsApp for the first time, so they're not used to that particular thing. It might be that they're an older person or younger person using technology, and they're not aware that actually they could be targeted with one of the text messages we've mentioned, and so we'll take it as genuine. It could be so. In generation, maybe one or two back from us, if you wanted to get a mortgage, you would go to the bank. You would probably put a suit on when you go to the bank to make this relevant to your world. And that would be, the bank manager would be a very important person. So if that generation now receives some sort of contact, a text message, email from the bank, they take that as genuine because the bank are to be trusted. Don't associate that actually criminals are using things like banks, the police in some instances, saying that the bank are in it, they need to withdraw the money from the account. So that's another vulnerability of a sort of an associated trust we place in certain roles in society, right through to us probably today. In that before you started recording, I certainly did, you might have flicked through your emails on your phone because you maybe got 5 minutes to spare. You might have noticed that there was one, and you might quickly respond to that because we're not necessarily thinking about the steps we should take to protect ourselves. So you click on a link because he says there's a problem with your account, and before you know it, you've opened your account up to the fraudsters.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? I think about probably 6 months ago, I had a holiday booked. It was through booking.com, all, very normal. And I was rushing out to an appointment and doing something or other. And a notification came up. It was from the booking.com app itself. So, of course, you think, well, very legitimate. Why would it be anything different? And it was a message that had come in saying that the payment had failed, or you can't pay when you arrive, or something like that. So you need to send us the money. And I must admit, yeah, it took me a couple of minutes, and I was, I was very close to clicking that link, and I opened it. To find that it wanted my bank details, and then I thought, hang on a minute, that's not normal. And so then I'd contacted booking.com, and apparently that is another known thing that happens. But because it comes from the app itself, there's a legitimacy there. It looks very official, and we have that authority bias, don't we? If we feel like something is coming from a place of authority, you're much more likely to fall foul of it. And it's very easily done. Put yourself under a bit of time pressure, or like you say, all the different vulnerabilities. We obviously work in the finance industry, and the FCA recently updated what they term as vulnerable, because you go back 10 years, it would be age was probably the only thing on the radar. And now, oh my goodness, like you say, situational, people getting divorced, people with caring responsibilities, you name it. The list goes on and on. Talks about literacy, numeracy issues, endless, actually, a huge range of vulnerable factors that can be fluid, ever-changing. It's a bit of a minefield. And I suppose the other thing is none of us really want to feel vulnerable, do we?
No, you don't. No one wants to say they're vulnerable. So, but we are vulnerable to certain situations. I mean, I've been a victim of fraud myself.
Really? Oh my goodness, tell us about that.
And this is where you say situational vulnerability, and maybe admitting to, if I'd have followed my advice, I wouldn't have become a victim of fraud. So I was on a social media platform on one occasion, and a advert for a golf trolley came up. And this is where I don't follow the next two stages of advice. The price was really good, so if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I didn't take 5 to research the company, or I put the details in, and lo and behold, I don't get the golf trolley. So fortunately, I didn't lose a large amount of money, but it shows in certain situations, I put myself into a vulnerable position because I didn't research, because I was that looks like a bargain.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that, to be honest. And we've talked about lots of different types of fraud here, retail, cyber fraud, romance, investment scams, that kind of thing. Even though they're all very different, do you see the same sort of patterns every time?
Same sort of patterns in terms of the
techniques? Well, in terms of the techniques that they use, yeah.
Yeah, generally. And that's why we can give the type of advice that we do. So one of the techniques in particular is sort of urgency. So it might be that something is at a discounted price and you've got to buy then. So that might be relevant for your online shopping. Or it might be when you're being contacted by your bank or the police saying there's a problem with your account, you need to act there and there. So it's that sort of urgency that is making us step outside of what we would ordinarily do to protect ourselves. So yeah, things like that we do regularly see all the time, depending on the type of offence.
And I suppose we saw a lot of things, didn't we, as well, during COVID, that it was quite an unusual time, and you've touched on isolation and loneliness and fear and uncertainty and all of these things. Did you see a spike? Were there more things to do with, bounce back loans, that kind of thing?
So COVID is a good example of how the fraudsters developed or changed their tried and tested method and adapted it to the situation. So whereas before you might get an email from the HMRC saying you're doing a tax rebate, during COVID it was for an email from HMRC saying you would use some sort of COVID loan or some support for COVID. And because of that situation where people were isolated, that's how they were getting targeted and becoming a victim of fraud. So
they weren't being reckless then. It was kind of an uncertain period and people just trying to get through.
Yeah. And then also what we saw in COVID was the acceleration of people moving to online shopping. And that's where we really saw an increase in that and people becoming a victim of that type of fraud. And what's continued on from then, as we see now, as online shopping, in terms of the number of victims, that's been by far the highest one in this particular area anyway.
And do you think people would be surprised by like the demographics? I think people in their minds have a theory that it's, I don't know, over 70s perhaps, or something like that, that might be kind of more likely to fall foul. Is that true when you look at the demographics and the statistics you guys run?
No, that is absolutely not true. That it's just sort of older people, people from as young as sort of 18 right through to in their 80s become, catch myself there, become victims of fraud. And that's because of the different types of fraud that are perpetrated that are aimed at different parts of the marketplace, to use a phrase that the fraudsters might use. So it might be online shopping aimed at younger people who are more prevalent and buying everything online and living their life online. And then for an older generation, it might be more an investment fraud, where the anticipation is that those individuals might have a pension and therefore might have more access, already available access to funds to invest. That's how it works, but there is no big spike of an age range.
Yeah, I think people would be surprised at that, actually. I would imagine people would assume otherwise. But that's interesting. And I suppose a lot of, I certainly know with my daughter, she's very impatient. The youth of today, they don't watch adverts kindly. They, are very click happy. They're very overconfident, I suppose, having grown up with technology just being a daily part of everyday life. And I suppose that could lead to that kind of rashness that we saw earlier that can lead to these risks, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you look at online shopping, and if you want to buy something, can you just put that in, I don't know, let's say a pair of shoes, the number of websites that will come up just to buy a pair of shoes, how many people actually then research those sites, those organizations, and to see if they're actually genuine? If they're the best price, I guarantee most people just go straight there and buy that.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
It's quick.
Yeah. Well, it's a very in-demand lifestyle, isn't it? And I was shocked actually the other day. I was thinking of this conversation the other day because I went to see some clients and they were a little bit older. They'd been referred by a solicitor and they wanted some general information and help with some inheritance tax planning. Absolutely fine. So I went to see them, and when I got there, what I didn't realise is that they were in their mid to late 80s, and there was a dementia diagnosis for one of the couple, so there was quite a lot going on there. But when I got there, we were talking about their investments, and they had a wide range of providers and pots and things going on, one of which was some cryptocurrency, and I thought, oh, it's interesting, isn't it? I thought, you don't seem like the natural crypto investors. And anyway, eventually I managed to get the son involved, and it turned out that it was an over-the-phone crypto conversation, but it was that I sort of gently questioned about it, and the lady had said, oh, this nice man called, and I thought, oh God. And that's where it all began. And she said, oh, and funnily enough, he's just been calling back saying how well it's doing, and did I want to put some more in? And oh my goodness, I thought, right, we need to talk to your son. We need to have some conversations about this, but it's happening all around us, isn't it? Absolutely everything, everywhere, to everyone, it feels.
I mean, crypto's perfect as well, because who actually understands crypto and crypto investments? So, and it's such there's this mystique. So, people could tell you anything about it, because there are those stories of Bitcoin or whatever, where people invested £1 and they're now got billionaires. So all you need to do is sell that story to one person, and people are investing in it.
Yeah, it's a worry, isn't it, that people are so willing to invest in things that they really don't actually understand the mechanics of whatsoever. Never mind. I mean, realistically, if that lady had to draw down them funds, I don't even think she'd know where to begin, And it is a worry. And I think the more complex, you don't want to feel daft either, do you? We don't really like asking questions. I obviously work in that industry, so it's easier. But equally, if I was going to try and start scaffolding my house, I'd have absolutely no idea where to begin. Anyone could tell me anything about the world of scaffolding. And so it's very difficult when things are complex to figure out what's right and what's wrong, I suppose.
And in examples like that, and how fraud, I suppose, has advanced over the years, if someone asked you to take £20,000 out of the bank, and go and just give it to someone and you'd only ever spoken to them on the telephone, I think people might question that actually. But where you can go onto your bank account and transfer it straight across, and they can send you something by email which will show a prediction of your figures, people are more trusting of that, I think, than actually
Yeah.
seeing the physical cash, because it looks like something as opposed to numbers on a page.
Yeah. Yeah, it's remarkable, really, isn't it? It's it is interesting. And I suppose the other thing, I mean, bless her, she had no idea that anything untoward could have even happened. And so that's going to be a whole conversation in telling someone that they're potentially having an issue that they didn't even realise they had an issue. But I suppose that also brings me to reporting. Like in terms of, from what I've read, we assume there's a much worse problem than there is because we also feel like people don't report as well. So do you think that's true? And what does that mean for yourselves and your investigations?
Fraud's a massively underreported offence. So I think the Office of National Statistics would show that all reported and unreported fraud probably makes up somewhere between 40 and 50% of all crime. However, we probably only get reported 1 in 7 of those. So you can see actually the sort of level of investigation. We've got 65 investigations. We have about 100 to 130 victims a week in this area, about 3,000, 3,500 a year. So, but that's reported fraud. So if you extrapolate that up to actually the unreported, it's an enormous number of people that are being targeted by fraudsters on a minute, hourly, daily basis. So it's a huge problem. So the main thing we need people to do is to report fraud. You can do that by contacting Report Fraud online, or you can ring them up and report it. That's the reporting mechanism for fraud, unless you've been targeted there and then by someone at your door, and you've handed some money over. Then you need to contact your local police force so we can take actions to do that. There are other organisations and other things you can do out there. If you think you've been a victim of fraud and you need to take action, the first thing I would encourage anyone to do, even before reporting, is contact the bank or financial institution so you can stop any transaction taking place there and then. But the more people that report in, the more we understand the frauds that are taking place, and the better ability we have to target those fraudsters.
Fair enough, and I do realise that the police put a lot of emphasis on prevention rather than cure. I imagine because, as you said at the beginning, a lot of these people are offshore, so the chance of getting your money back, especially in unregulated things like crypto and that kind of thing, that are fairly slim, I imagine.
Yeah, the phrase I would use for this is we can't arrest our way out of this particular problem, and because the fact the offenders are abroad, we can't bring them into custody, charge them, send them to court, send them to prison, and that resolves the issue. So a large amount of our work is targeted, and that's why opportunities like this are fantastic, at protection and prevention. So giving people the tools, the knowledge, the experience, so that when they receive a call and it's from someone in their bank claiming that there's a problem with the account and they move the money, they know to take 5 and take certain steps to prevent themselves from being a victim. Because that way, by having the conversation with our friends, family, etc., we can protect people from becoming victims.
Yeah, no, I think that's really sensible, really practical advice. So you mentioned things like urgency, artificial deadlines that can sort of make there. It's a big red flag, isn't it? And authority, secrecy, people saying, don't tell anyone about this, they can't be trusted, that kind of thing. And of course, playing on emotion, fear, or too good to be true. And I suppose unusual payment methods as well. You hear quite a lot, correct me if I'm wrong, but you hear a lot about gift cards, that kind of thing.
Gift cards is a big one, yeah. So especially someone like you've got a parking fine and you need to pay the parking fine in gift cards, or you've got a tax bill but you need to pay it in Apple gift cards. No organisation is going to ring up and say you need to pay the fine. I'll tell another one when they say, hello, this is the police, if you don't pay we're going to come and arrest you. I absolutely guarantee we don't give people prior warning. And we certainly don't ask people to pay things in gift cards.
No.
Because they become untraceable. We've actually got an example of where our protect work has actually worked in this space. Where we've spoken to some supermarkets about this, and we have some little flyers that should sit above the gift cards. And one person went into the supermarket and was looking to buy, I think it was about £1,000 worth of gift cards. But because we'd gone in and done the protect work with the supermarket staff, they actually contacted the police, and we were able to go out and speak to that individual and prevent him from losing that money.
Oh my goodness, isn't that amazing? So it really is prevention over cure for this.
Absolutely, yeah.
My goodness. Any other interesting stories or tidbits or things that you feel like the audience needs to hear right now?
I'll just reiterate, if I don't mind, the sort of protect general advice is we always encourage people, and it is an organisation you can Google called Take 5, to take 5. That's not a literal take 5 minutes, but what that means is if you receive a telephone call, you get an email, you get a text message, before you do anything with it, you take 5 to research the authenticity of that. So if someone calls you pretending to be from your bank, you get your bank card out, on the back's the customer service number, you ring that number to check if there's a problem with the account. If there's a text message and it says that your Netflix account, you need to change the payment details, you don't click the link, you go onto your Netflix account. So take 5 is probably the biggest thing, to stay in control, because as long as you stay in control and you're not rushed and actually have the confidence to say no, then you can protect yourself from being a victim.
That's a fair point. We're a very polite nation, aren't we? We're quite obedient, I suppose, in some ways. We don't want to put anyone out. We don't want to cause any issues, do we? We want to try and be helpful. And I think actually maybe being a little bit more cynical, and I suppose not just taking someone's word for it. We've got to get better at verifying things, haven't we, with actual evidence and proof, as opposed to just taking the word off of a text message or something for gospel.
Absolutely. And I suppose just coming on from that just slightly, is this isn't meant to be scaremongering though, for anyone, because if we do that all those steps, you can shop online perfectly safe, you can do your online banking, etc., perfectly safe, as long as you have things in place, things like 2-factor authentication when you're logging into your bank account, and then everything's fine and you can live your life in this sort of digital world. Just stay in control.
Absolutely sound advice. Thank you so much, not just for today, but for the work you and your team do. It's really, really important.
Thank you.
Well, if this episode made you rethink your own assumptions, please share it. As we've noted, prevention starts with understanding these scams, and if we want to stop it, it begins at home with each of us. I'm Zoe Taylor, and this is Money, Crimes and Human Minds. Join us again next Wednesday for our weekly short news report, and please like, subscribe, and remember to mind the money and watch the mind.